Hello there! My name is Tanner, and I'd like to finally welcome you back to my YouTube channel. Man, does it feel good to say that again. Now, for those of you who don't already know, my channel was temporarily put on hiatus because my old computer essentially gave up the ghost, so I am recording this on my brand new computer that I have just recently purchased. So now I'm happy to report I can finally create some new content for you guys to watch. Now, since I didn't have anything else prepared, I decided I'm just gonna talk about my next group of characters that I created for December RPG, even though technically it's no longer December. Now, for those of you who don't already know, long story short, I'm creating a fantasy role-playing game, or RPG for short, based on a fantasy world that I created, and I'm currently creating characters for that fantasy world in the way that I created so that any future players can create their own characters. Now, if you haven't seen any of these other videos, I'm going to put a link to a playlist of them, as well as the videos where I discussed the basic elements of the RPG itself, up in the cards and in the description down below. Now, like with the previous parts in this series, I'm going to be talking about the character lore first, and then the creative process behind each one. So, even though it's no longer December, I'm hopeful that you'll enjoy these guys and gals anyway. So without further ado, here is the fourth group of characters from the RPG I'm making based on my fantasy world. Melody Hanson was born the daughter of two mages, who were both part of a troupe of circus performers. Her mother would use her magic to create dazzling pyrotechnic displays, while her father would use his magic to charm the animals. When Melody was born, her parents knew she was going to be special, and that her magic would express itself in a different way from either of theirs. When her magic was finally realized and turned out to be music, her parents were so proud. Melody traveled with the circus troupe until she was old enough to strike out on her own. Her parents and the rest of the circus troupe, who she saw as family, gave her a special pin depicting their symbol and told her that as long as she wore that pin, she would always be able to find them, no matter where in the world they were. They also told her that if she ever decided to come and visit, she would always be welcomed. Now, like with most characters that I've created so far, this character is based on a fantasy novel that I wrote. In this case, she's a mage, more specifically a bard, which in my world is a mage who specializes in musical magic. Personality-wise, I imagine her to be akin to a stereotypical rocker chick, but with a big dose of protectiveness towards her friends and allies for good measure. Nikolai Harris, or Nick for short, was orphaned at a very young age and was raised by his grandmother. She was a loving, wonderful, if a bit strict, caretaker for him. He loved playing with his friends and learning magic and tinkering with his toys. However, the day that his magic was realized was the proudest day of his life, as well as his grandmother's. He could now use his technology magic to craft new Magitech items and help others fix their existing Magitech. Now, when I used the process for character creation that I made for my RPG, for those of you who don't know, rolling an 8-sided die, or D8, and seeing which number came up, the roll for Nick came up mage, so I decided to make him a technomancer, which is a mage whose magical specialty is technology. I imagine him to be a stereotypical nerd in personality, with a place for everything in its place kind of attitude, if that makes sense. Lily Zhao was the daughter of two proud riders, Li and Sun Zhao. Her father was a dragon rider and her mother a unicorn rider. When Lily was born, her parents' mounts, Crest the ocean dragon and Aurora the unicorn, also had a child, a Kirin they named Coral. Coral and Lily did not get along well at first, but soon they became fast friends. It wasn't long before they formed a rider's bond with each other. From that day forward, their friendship grew even closer. Now, the role for Lily came up rider, so I thought, wouldn't it be fun if her mount was a hybrid of her parents' mounts? So, alongside Lily, the rider, Coral the Kirin, the daughter of a dragon and a unicorn, came to life. Personality-wise, I imagine both of them as being complementary to each other. Whereas Lily is more outgoing, warm, and friendly, Coral is more reserved and demure. Everyone knows the story of Red Riding Hood, but what people don't know is that after that childhood encounter with Big Bad Wolf, they, later on in life, met back up together, and he surprisingly apologized for what he did. After all, as a werewolf with an ancestral connection to Aeolus, the Greco-Roman immortal of the wind, was it any wonder he was rather blustery? But eventually, though it didn't happen at first, she did forgive him, and they formed a friendship, which eventually developed into a rather scandalous relationship. A few years later, they got married, and a few years after that, their daughter Ruby was born. This next role came up storyborn, and so once again, I used a character from the fantasy novel that I wrote. Now, like with some of the other storyborn characters, I kind of hand-waved certain parts of their origin story a bit to avoid some uncomfortable questions. I also thought it would be fun to make it so that the same Big Bad Wolf who terrorized Red Riding Hood was also the same one who terrorized the three pigs. And so, Ruby would inherit his ability to, well, huff and puff, if that makes sense. Jasmine Tanaka was born the Goliath daughter of two members of a pirate group. Her father was the human captain, and her mother was his first mate, and an Oni. Many, many years they sailed the sea, acting akin to Robin Hood and his merry men. Though, while Robin Hood roamed Sherwood Forest, the crew of the Red Cutlass sailed the seven seas, robbing from other pirates and giving it to the less fortunate. One day, Jasmine met a young man while the Red Cutlass and her crew were ashore, and, as many stories like this one goes, they fell in love with each other. Jasmine knew that something was strange about her new suitor, but she liked it. After a while, the young couple found out she was pregnant, and then her young suitor revealed himself to be Triton, Grecian immortal of the Navy and herald to his father Poseidon. As such, their child would in fact be a demigod. He then revealed that, traditionally, demigod children were to be raised by their mortal parents, but he would visit as often as he could. A few months later, Jasmine and Triton's daughter was born, and Jasmine named her Ariella. Now, this role came up as a Type 1 demigod, and so I thought of the idea to give Ariella a demimyth parent. specifically a Goliath, whose magical parent is a member of the giant family, and whose father is the immortal son of the Grecian immortal of the sea, Poseidon. As such, Ariella possesses many abilities, including, but not limited to, superhuman strength, the ability to breathe underwater, and the ability to both generate and manipulate water. Also, due to her mother being a demimyth, Ariella inherited the ability to switch between her human form and her magical form at will. Robin Redplume was born the daughter of a harpy couple. However, her parents mysteriously disappeared before her egg hatched. Iris, the Greco-Roman immortal of the rainbow, was just passing through, and she saw the abandoned egg and took pity on it. She flew it up to her Olympian apartment, where she and her husband Zephyrus, the gentle immortal of the west wind and bringer of spring, raised baby Robin as their own daughter. That is, until the day she asked them what happened to her biological parents. Iris and Zephyrus told her that they did not know where they were, but she was destined to figure out what happened to them. That day was the day she left her cushy home on Olympus, and she's been wandering the world ever since. Now, this next role came up as a Type 2 demigod, and so I figured, what if a harpy was raised by the immortal rainbow messenger from Greco-Roman mythology? Now, at first, Robin was going to be raised by the other Grecian messenger immortal Hermes as well, but then I found out that in the myths, Iris was actually married to the gentle west wind Zephyrus. So I altered the story a little bit so that Robin would be raised by an actual husband and wife duo. Make things a little less controversial. Born the daughter of a Sphinx couple, Nita Leos was heavily involved with her parents' library. She loved living and working there, reading the old tomes, sorting new shipments to the right shelves, etc. Her parents gave her a wonderful childhood, but one day, Nitanat and her parents went to open the library and found it in ruins. The building looked as if it had been burned down, but they could also deduce from the acrid odor in the air that someone used the potion known as Greek fire to burn it. They know it was deliberate, but they do not know who did it or why. That day, Nitanat vowed she would find out who did this heinous crime and why they did it. Those questions have not yet been answered, but that doesn't mean they won't be. Now, this next role came up magical being, and so I thought it would be a fun idea to do a Sphinx character. Now, I thought it would only be fitting if her parents owned a library, but as a plot point, I thought, what would happen if the parents' library was mysteriously destroyed? As you could tell from the lore of this character, certain questions have been answered and others haven't. At least, not yet. And there we have it. That was the fourth group of characters that I created for my fantasy RPG based on my fantasy world. If you want to know more about these characters, I'll have the links to their respective articles on my website in the description below. If you like this video and you want more, please give this video a like and subscribe down below so you don't miss any new videos. Also, if there are any other ideas you might want to see in future videos, please leave your thoughts in the comments section down below, and it might just happen. Alright, well, that's all the time I have for this video, so I will see you guys next week with the final group of fantasy characters. Spoiler warning, they're all going to be storyborns. See you then.